Hi friends! As you can see, we will cover the different shader brushes that I have in my collection. This is not in collaboration with Fude Beauty. As you know, I work with Fude Beauty a lot as they send me brushes, they send me the info. I just love to speak about brushes. I love the relationship and my links are affiliated. So if you choose to buy a brush, I do get a kickback and your consideration is always appreciated. I just wanted to talk more about brushes, specifically the shader brush category. Now, while I understand that is very wide in terms of the design, the specific design I'm talking about is the fluffy shader, the brush that's flat on both sides, but it might have a taper. The bristle might be longer than the standard and you can use it for both shadow laydown and blending. And I think it's the most interesting and the one eyeshadow brush tool I feel is most accessible to many makeup wearers, especially if they are light eyeshadow wearers. They like the one and done looks, maybe with powders and creams, and they just need that one brush to lay it down nicely, have enough movement and flexibility to actually buff the edges across the crease without having to reach for another brush. The simplicity and approach, I think, makes it appealing for one to choose a shader brush over another brush conically shaped like your typical blender, right? I think these were very popular years ago when beauty, YouTube, and Instagram was on the high, you know, when TikTok wasn't around, and everyone will lay down their first transition shade with one of those blending brushes. The shader brush, I think, is the underdog. It has always been just so versatile, and the wide range of design it can come in terms of the bristle length, the density, the type of bristles. So we'll cover A through Z-ish. Do I have a Z brand? No, I don't. There's a Z series in Chikuhodo, but whatever, we're gonna get to that in a minute. I might miss a few, but these are my favorites, ones that I reach for, even if you don't see them on camera, if I'm applying makeup off camera, because it does happen sometimes. I'll reach for these brushes and I do feel they are immaculate in terms of the construction. The expectations are sky high, and every time I use any of these brushes, my makeup application specifically for the eyes is absolutely flawless. And that was a very long spiel without me introducing myself. My apologies if it's your first time clicking on this video and you're like, who are you? Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm an online coach specializing in flexibility and body weight strength, but I also love to talk about makeup and brushes. And of course, during this video, not only will I go over the brushes, but there'll be a few demos in the mix showcasing the different textured eyeshadows that I think might be challenging or ones that are ideal for several of these shader brushes. So with all that out the way, why don't you come in a little closer? That's enough. Let's begin with B. We have BK Beauty 203 and Bisyodo ESO2 eyeshadow brushes. Now the BK Beauty one is a synthetic brush, and I would argue a more traditionally designed one where it's a shorter bristle, you have a little bit of a dome, is flat on both sides. Although you can argue there is some movement, I would say there's a little more feedback than a longer bristle brush, and great for laying down that showstopper shade if it's a shimmer or metallic or even a satin-like texture. You can even bring color to your lower lash line if you want a little bit of a blend there. This is a little stiffer and more rough than, let's say, Blue Squirrel, right? So not great if you have a lot of lid movement. If you find that if you want a brush to blend through your crease, I wouldn't necessarily use this for blending, and BK Beauty also promotes this as being the shader like fingertip brush. So this is, I think, optimal for, again, the lay down shade. And if we look at the Bisyodo brush, this is made out of horsehair, and there is a taper here, is flat on both sides. You see the crimp here on the ferrule. Horsehair, not as soft as goat or squirrel, but there's a really nice flow to the design, and you can as well also use this to lay down your metallic or shimmer shade on the lid, but you could also bring a little bit through the crease. Stiffer than the other brushes I will present, But if you are in a jam, you can definitely use this brush for a little bit of crease blending. Now, my lid skin does move a little bit. However, I can get away with a nice smooth blend with this brush. It's not the softest, so a little more resilient, again, because it is horsehair, but great pickup if you want more of a product lay down than, let's say, you would get from blue or gray squirrel, or even like a soft dyed goat hair. Again, these two more of a traditional shader brush approach, but great for the lay down role. C's for Chikuhodo. We have 3 lines here, the Silver Fox line, the FO series, the Kazan Squirrel, the KZ series, and the GSN series. I'll start with the GSN because it's the longest brush out of the bunch. This has a beautiful pearl handle with a gold ferrule, and this is made of gray squirrel. I think it might be blue because, let me first say that shout out to Sonia G, sweetmakeuptemptations.com. Sonia G is who I hold high regard in terms of Fude anything. She has an extensive collection, and her breadth of knowledge is just outstanding in terms of how she can describe the different bristles and give us different brush examples because she has all the brushes. I'll make sure to post that specific blog post down below because I think it is just so fascinating, and it better steers the consumer in terms of choosing the right brush for their makeup application and the type of makeup that they're using. So my apologies for that tangent, but it's an important one. GSN 09, again, might be blue squirrel, distinguishable by the gray roots here at the edge of the ferrule. This definitely has a little more floppiness to it, and that's something that's typical with gray squirrel, where maybe with the goat hair brush there's a little more bounce back, right? A little more elasticity. This is very soft, so not only will this be prime for laying down a lid color, ultra soft too. If you have sensitive eyes, whether on the lid or lower lash line, this just feels like silk on your skin. Great for the lower lash line. I think more optimal for those who, again, especially sensitive here, inner corner and lower lash line. It just brings the color beautifully here without any stabby, scratching feeling. You could use this to pull color through the lid. I think that might be determined by your eye shape. If it is smaller than mine, then why not? You could just nudge this right in there and then brush the edges of the shadow, or just use this to quickly swipe the color through your lid. And if you have a smaller lid space, then you'll get the color on there quickly. But for someone with my eye shape or larger, I think more ideal for the spotlight shade, that maybe you use 2 metallic shades on the inner and outer brackets of your lid, and you use something lighter like a duochrome something. That spotlight tap around, I think, is great for this particular size. Now with the FO series, the Silver Fox hair. Whew, I have 3 here, FO5, FO7, and the FO10. The FO5 is what I consider to be my favorite type of shader brush. Now, perhaps this will be better called a blender. I say fluffy shader because, again, it has the flat sides here, not crimped. It just comes in a slight taper here, but it has such a beautiful dome shape to it that look, it just takes up the entirety of my lid space. You flip it here, perfect for that one. Oh, there was a little bit of color on that brush, excuse me, my apologies. Flip it through, get the crease blend, and you're done. It could be a little big for the lower lash line. However, if you're one to enjoy that grungy, like sickly look on the eyes, then that brush size is fine. You could also use that brush to tap on more of a color on the outer lid. Excuse me while I tap down some eye primer, because I do want to show the versatility of this brush, right? I think it's just outstanding. And again, one of my most favorite types of shaders, where, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's just a wide spectrum of different sizes found under the umbrella of the shader shape in Fude. Can go in with no other than a Suqqu shadow. I think one of the most ideal textures for one and done looks. Simply smooth and beautiful, where not only does it apply well on the lid, but you could just see from that swatch how it'll just slide across your crease effortlessly. I'll take my FO5 with that same color here, and I think it best to run the brush back and forth. Look at that pickup. Do you see the pickup? And now let's pull that across the lid, and you can see I'm using short stroke motions to evenly distribute the color. And then I'll use a pull down technique here, making sure it doesn't get too high yet, because again, we want to lightly blend through the crease. Picking up a little bit more so I can cover the outer part of the lid here. And here we go. Without any additional product, because we deposited the majority of it on the lid, turn the brush on its side and now go swirl and twirl. You could even keep it on the side, right? So this is perfect to nudge in your crease. If you have deep set eyes, it won't allow the color to travel too high. You see that? So the taper here on the other side, I'm sorry for the chip nail polish, my apologies. It perfectly blends the shadow in the crease without it traveling too high. And I think that ideal, again, for smaller eyes, if you don't feel comfortable using this type of a brush. You can use the windshield wiper technique that I had just demonstrated with the F05, absolutely. But because this is flat, I feel it's more conservative in keeping the color in the crease and not it blowing up too high. I think that more of an ideal setup for a beginner. You could let me know down below if you're one to not wear a lot of eyeshadow and you consider yourself a beginner makeup wearer and you're like, actually, Alicia, I like the blender better. Totally fine. I think for myself, perfect for these one and done moments. And look, you're done. You're done. You just have to apply mascara, maybe a little bit of liner if you want to go there. But look, that was just the F05. The F06, much smaller. Here's a size comparison. We're looking at a more precise application here. I'm sure you could probably already tell. Great for the inner corner, maybe a little bit of spotlight here on the center of the lid. Great for the lower lash line. If you want to keep the color tighter to your lash line, if you don't want it to go too low, if you want more of a precise application, then yes to this. I still consider it a shader because it is flat on both sides. A lot more tapered. Yes, it comes to more of a point. There's still a slight dome here. Fantastic though, again, for precise work. And lastly, we have the F010. This is your so-called fingertip brush. There is just a great taper here from low to high, and this design makes it great for a hardier pickup than you would get from the F05. For instance, I'm gonna pick a problem shade, okay? I'm gonna go into Midnight Sun, and Midnight Sun is my favorite Pat McGrath palette. Yes, Subversive is like still up there, but this is number one. Jubilee is one of these baked gel formulas that could be a little tough, right? Picked it up with the F10, and look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous. And of course, you can still use the edge of the brush to spread it across the crease if you wanted, right? Just to evenly distribute that. Lay down, tap around as you like. So the F010, I think more of a traditional shader. You do have better blending with the F05, but I think more appropriate to use the F05 with the softer lay down of color, just out the door, okay, lid crease, and you're done. That was the FO series. Now we're going into the Kazan series. Kazan is another type of squirrel, and it is softer than Blue Squirrel. Exquisitely silky. I mean, this specifically is the KZ06. This is the bigger, the larger eyeshadow brush. Very soft here, dense. It's just well packed, and man, this all day, every day. So maybe you don't want to use a shimmer or satin shade like the one we did from Suqqu. Perhaps we'll go in with the pat shade. Let's see. I'm going to go in with Vermilion Venom. I'm going to tap first just to get the color on the lid. And then, you know, why not? Do a little swirl and twirl in addition to the windshield wiper. So this is so incredibly soft. Despite the fact that it is packed with bristles, the way it glides over the skin is remarkable. This brush is one of the best, and why I understand it's one of the designs that always sells out, because if you have sensitive eyes and you cannot bear even soft goat hair, dyed Chikuhodo goat hair, this is the one. Look at that. Oh my gosh. I'm like getting the feels because every time I apply Vermilion Venom, and I haven't applied it by itself in a very long time, just the toasty reddish hue of this shade is my favorite. So there you have it. You're done. You're done. You could just keep it as is if you wanted. You could tap on another color in here. Let's say you wanted to use the smaller shader. This is the KZ07 in the same line, and next to its counterpart, very small, significantly smaller, right? You're looking at a huge size difference, but I like that jump because you could use the KZ06 and then you could use the KZ07 for a little more precise work. So I believe this is Blood Moon. I picked up a little bit and I'm just going to tap it now over the center of my lid. It doesn't have to be a crazy lay down of color. Again, I'm taking more of a beginner approach in this video. You could use Pat Intensifies or your favorite eyeshadow like grippy type of a primer to get more of like that shiny metallic finish from this shade. But once it kind of settles into Vermilion Venom, I think it's just a lovely effect. Definitely. Great for inner corner highlight. If you want it, you can tap into the Skin Show shade and just whip it gently here on the inner part of the eye. And take this also, why not? Let's go in with the bronze shade. I think this is Bronze Eclipse. Just whip it here on the inner part of the eye. This bristle is incredibly soft. It's versatile. I liken it to Silver Fox hair, not in terms of softness, but just its versatility. The fact that despite how soft it is, it still has incredible pickup, and the blending is just out of this world. And lastly, we have from the Z series classic 05 shader brush. Now compared to the KZ06 from the Kazan series, this is a more direct brush. Yeah, you got a little more movement here, a little more fluff. This is definitely more direct. I think fantastic for the lay down moment. So I'm gonna hop into Supreme Offs and I'm gonna pick up a problem shade for sure. Let's do Strip Down. Yes. In this manner, we're gonna toggle side to side. This won't pick up as well as, let's say, the FO10. But what I like about this brush is just how smooth it is on the lid, and you can still take it through the crease in the same manner that we did with the FO5 from the FO series. Incredible for lower lash line application. So let's dip into Sex Appeal, and I will pull that shade just here. Very soft, ideal for the lower lash line, and it won't drop the color too far down because I think this is a unique brush where it comes in pretty nicely here on a taper, but it maintains uniformity, right? There's not a lot of splay. The bristles stay in tightly packed, but there's incredible movement where if you want to blend, you most certainly can. You definitely still have that option on the table. All right, that is all the Chikuhodo brushes. What's next? We have our Eihodo brushes. These two are from the WP series. Now we have Canadian Squirrel and Dyed Sokoho Goat. Canadian Squirrel is great. It's soft, resilient. It has nice elasticity, great pickup, amazing blend. I love this particular shape because a little longer than what we have previously seen, and this gorgeous taper here. So listen, fantastic for that lay down, but there's a lot more push here because of the longer bristle, so it's not going to have the same feedback as the KZ06, not the same as FO5. This is a little more floppy-oppy, and I don't think ideal to use with a shadow, for instance, like from Melt Cosmetics. Those mattes need a little bit of a push, and this is, I think, a little too soft to get that color through the crease. If you want a little more, you got the Dyed Sokoho Goat hair. This has a little more feedback, and I think more ideal for the lid lay down. Also great for the lower lash line application. This is not as soft as the Canadian Squirrel, so you have to decide what your preference would be, but this is one of my most favorites just to bring along travel wise because it has a shorter handle and it's multi-purpose. Yeah, I could just again quickly whip a color through my crease, especially with a Suqqu shadow. This is an ideal combination right here, right here. The Suqqu formula, again, is soft and silky. It doesn't need a lot of movement. You don't need to over manipulate the blend. It's just the right consistency that aligns with this brush's design, where you're done. You're done. Next, we have ESUM, the in-house brand of Muse Beauty Pro. Now, this is sable hair. Under the umbrella sable, you have Kolinsky and Weasel. I'm not entirely sure if this is Kolinsky. It might be, but we have the W23 and W21. Kolinsky generally can be used with powders and creams. That is a plus, okay? If you are a wearer of cream eyeshadows, you could use between both. Let's say you have a cream and a powder product. You apply the cream product first, wipe the brush, and then go in with your powder product. Very simple. This has a lot more feedback, so it's not as flexible as, let's say, the Kazan or even the F05. This is the smaller version, so more for precise application here if you want to tap on the center of the lid. Great for inner corner. Yes, the inner tear duct, but fantastic for this portion of the lid. I like to add another color here on the inner bracket and then introduce another color here on the majority of the lid, so you can really play with your gradient there with the smaller brush. And of course, the W23, forget it. If you have that one and done cream shadow, you could whip it across your lid and then lightly take the edges. This is not going to have the same movement quality as another brush like the Eihodo S-1 from the WP series with the Canadian squirrel bristle. This is a little more tough. It has a little more push, okay? So you can still apply the color on your lid, and depending on your lid movement, you can pull the bristles through the crease. You can. Great for the lower lash line. It still feels a little more stiff, however, than the gray squirrel or even some goat hair brushes. H, we have Hakuhodo Classic. This is the J220. This is a synthetic and goat hair mix. My apologies for it being so dirty, but I adore this brush because of its size, versatile, because of the blend. You can use it with cream and powders. Thinner than what you've seen, so you got a lot of movement here. Fantastic for the laydown. You can pull color through the crease if you wanted. I think you get more of a robust blend from the Kazan large shadow brush. I know I'm so partial to that line. Nevertheless, you can still make the blend happen here. I still would rely on this brush for cream eyeshadow just to whip it across because I like the thinner design. It just makes it a little more wispy in terms of the application. You could get a really nice blur on the edges and fantastic for your lower lash line. Probably have another Hakuhodo brush somewhere that belongs in the shader category, but I'm sorry, it's probably lost, stuck somewhere. I need to organize my brushes. Now we have Hokoudo, which is another brand, not to be confused with Hakuhodo. This is Hokoudo. We have two from the Sora line. I believe this is the G-S2 and the GS5. The GS5 is made of Canadian squirrel, and compared to Eihodo's S1 WP, it's significantly smaller. You can see that. But what can that be good for? Well, if you have smaller eyes and maybe the S1 is just way too big, fantastic for that lid lay down, but beautiful to get more precisely in that crease. Windshield wiper, you could do the swirl and twirl. I think this is more ideal for the windshield wiper because it is flat on both sides. It has that really nice silky blend on the trail. Great for if you have smaller eyes, especially if you don't want the color to travel up. You just fit this right into the crease and look at that. It gets it right there. You can lightly tap color, and which is something I also like to rely on shaders for, fluffy ones, is to lay down that color on the outer part of your lid for intensity. But I think it's more of an even application than if you were to apply that color with, like with the blender brush of a smaller size, right? Like you use a smaller tapered brush. Because of the taper, I don't think the application is as even, but when you use a shader and it is flat on both sides, you get that really beautiful color laid down first, and then you use the fluffiness to whip the edges up and towards the end of your lash line. And I just think it's a more even presentation of that color. Great for lower lash line, as you can see. So if you have smaller eyes and you're like looking at the S1, you're like, it's a little too big, then the GS2. The GS5 from the Source series, this is Kolinsky. Kolinsky, I believe, is the highest level of sable hair. And the versatility, again, using it with creams and liquids, a lot more stiff. What would this be good for? More precise work on the lid, great for the inner part of the lid, fantastic for the tear duct, more precise here on the lower lash line. So with many brushes you have seen that are this size compared to one that is bigger, I'm sure you can surmise that best for that lid application, that spotlight moment, right? And the bigger ones is more of a washed out kind of like watercolor effect on the eye. This is from the Moe series, the PS7, I believe. This is Pine Squirrel and Weasel. So an interesting blend. Pine Squirrel is not as uniform as Canadian. It's still soft. It has really nice elasticity. And with the Weasel is a great blend for fantastic pickup, great blending. This is a more, I think, direct shape, right? It's more of a literal shape compared to, again, Eihodo's S1. This one has a more pronounced taper. This is more flat here on the edge. I usually use this for a lay down moment, not as much for blending. I don't think there's enough fluff in the brush design for me to, the way I like my shadow to appear through my crease. So I would primarily use this for a more robust laydown of color on the lid because of its wide shape. So you're done in a jiffy. Actually, let's hop into Cleona and Emily Violet Marie. Let's pick up something fun. Let's pick up exotic. I'm gonna go back and forth, and you see, again, great pickup. The Moe brush basically takes up the entirety of my lid on one laydown, and there you have it. It's done. It's soft enough to then spread the shadow and tap in and under my crease. You can still windshield wiper it just to kind of spread the color through evenly. Pull it down. Yeah. Fantastic. And still very soft. I would argue, even though this is a blend, still very soft. Maybe not as soft as Canadian, or well, definitely not as soft as Squirrel. And you see though, even though I didn't swirl and twirl, just the edge of the brush is great just to whip it up, right? And it kind of flows up nicely. It looks blurred. It doesn't look blunt and rough on the edges. Excellent brush. We're up to K. Koyudo, specifically La Fuga del Gato. We have this one coming up, but I wanted to showcase the two shader brushes from the Kakishibuzome series, distinguishable by the persimmon dyed bristles here. And for you to better see what I'm talking about, hold on. This is one of their powder brushes. You just see this gorgeous gradient from the beige into like this toasted orange look. Again, they use persimmon to dye the bristles, and they also do the same method with the shader brushes. Now these two are Sokuho 04 and 05, both made of Chikuhodo goat hair. I think this is oh god, don't fall. I think these are the first Chikuhodo goat brushes in the video, and that bristle is just versatile. Not as soft as Squirrel for sure, and people usually don't reach for Chikuhodo or buy eye brushes made of this bristle because they think it's too rough or their eyelid skin can't handle it. Depending on the situation, however, I think Chikuhodo is a great general bristle. It hits a lot of people on the spectrum in terms of skin condition, makeup application expectations, what type of shadow they're using. This is a more direct design, right? It's a shorter bristle. It comes to a slight taper here. This is great for me, more of a lay down moment. I can still get some blend here by turning the brush on its side, like you see here. Let's say I wanted to apply the deeper shade, and what I was explaining earlier, how I like shaders for that outer quadrant lay down, because I think it's just a more even application of color. Even though this is still a shader, there's enough fluff, I think, on the edge where you can use the pull down method in this way and still swirl and twirl softly, or you could go in, whip it side to side just to get a little more color through the crease, or you can go out this way to complete the blend. I think this is like one of the best ways to use a shader that's a little more tightly packed, right? A little more tightly packed than what you saw from the Eihodo brush. Again, a more literal shader brush, but it's so unique because although it has that feedback, it's still very soft and silky. As you can see, the way it just glides over the skin is extraordinary. And again, I feel ideal for that application of the more intense shadow that sometimes people have problems with applying and it look uneven. I think this is a more appropriate approach for beginners. It makes it easier in terms of viewing the eye as like color by number, right? You just have, and I'll show it with the smaller brush here, you just have that shape to, again, feel where the color goes. Feel where the color goes. You pull it down gently, okay? It's not about over manipulating the blend. Again, these brushes have uncut ends that do the blending for you. That's why you spend this type of a money if you choose to for a brush that's handmade versus machine made, because the ends are blunt on a machine made brush and the blend is not as smooth, it's not as effortless. This, you just allow the brush to do its thing. Okay, there's no need to move the skin, to do anything weird. Probably tell, great for lower lash line application, okay? Now here's a situation where we could use a longer shader brush for. This is great for like a finishing moment. It's just very light and wispy on the skin, and it's this in words. So those are from the Kakishibuzome line, and La Fuga del Gato, this is also from Koyudo, another synthetic brush. This has a little more movement than, let's say, the BK Beauty one. It's a little bigger, but again, great if you want to apply a cream product here. And my apologies that I'm not showing a cream product. They're lost somewhere in my makeup. I gotta stop buying so much makeup. This is a little softer than many synthetic brushes I have encountered. I do think Japanese synthetic bristle technology is superior than others, and that's just based on what I have personally used and the results I see from using a Japanese made synthetic brush versus others. Because although this is more of a traditionally designed blender, I think it's still very smooth and soft to take color across the crease. I would prefer to use a natural hair brush because I think it's a smoother and better blend, but if this was the only brush that you use, and if you don't use natural hair brushes, then the Del Gato line I think is fantastic. And this brush specifically, the shader one, great for overall lid lay down and possibly optional crease blend, which I think you can be successful with. And Nakamura Seishakusho from the Nao line, this is large eyeshadow brush 6 with a weasel and pony hair blend. I think this might be one of the biggest eyeshadow brushes I have in this category, and I adore it again for its versatility. It's resilient, it has nice feedback, it has a nice blend here because it is larger and a little stiffer than my Canadian brushes. So again, I am pulling up Eihodo's WP. You can see that there's just a little more movement. So again, here you have Canadian squirrel, and here you have the weasel and pony hair. So you do get a nice blend, but if you want a little more feedback from your shader brush, where it is, I mean, more than ideal to lay this on the lid. Let's pick another color, shall we? Let me go in with Melt Gemini because we can definitely pick up schmood here all over. Let's check out the pickup. There you go. Pulling that across the lid. And once we do, you can then windshield wiper. Now this won't be as fluffy than others that we've seen. However, ideal if you want to keep the color tight to under the crease, if you don't want it to travel too high. And this generally is fantastic, not only for the lid, keeping it tight to the crease, lower lash line, there you go. I think this is a fantastic brush. I believe you can still maybe use this with creams. I'm not entirely sure. I'm just saying that based on the fact that it is a weasel blend. I know pony hair probably could take the other cream and liquid mediums, but If that is the case, then highly versatile in terms of how many different makeup products you can use with this brush, but even more so with the breadth of different application techniques you can rely on this brush on to perform lid, crease, and lower lash line. We've arrived at Sonia G and Suqqu. I got 4 Sonia G brushes here, 3 from her Fundamentals line and 1 from her Sky Eye set. Now I understand that in the line there is the Builder. The Builder is fantastic. It's, again, more precise in its role, that lay down shader where you want that hard to pick up metallic to show up on your lid. Tappity tap, get it on the lid. I like, for instance, the Jumbo Blender. This is Daisokoho Goat Hair. You know, the one brush that many people, when they ask Alicia, what in the heck do I use to pick up a Natasha Denona cream to powder formula, I would say it's a Jumbo Blender, okay? The reason why I suggest this type of a brush is its apparent density and the pickup. So the back and forth, which, you know what? Let me wipe this off and come back with Metropolis. Hold on. For the sake of just speediness, I'm applying LYS's concealer not only on the under eye, but also the lid for some priming. And boy, oh boy, did I totally mess up this brow. Excuse me for a minute. All right, hopping into Metropolis, which I would like to revisit eventually because this is a doozy of a palette. Recommending a denser type of a shader. You see this is significantly thicker than, let's say, the 04 Koyudo Kakishibuzome brush. You see the difference in girth, if you will. It still has nice fluff on the edges for blending, but I think the thickness is an ideal setup to pick up these cream to powder textures, which people have problems with, right? So let's take Lethal, right? I'm going back and forth, just getting as much color as I can, and you can see that's gonna pick up quite a bit. And now I'm just gonna whip it on my lid and spread it as evenly as I can. And this is why I love the Jumbo Blender fam, because it successfully grabs the cream to powder textures. And this design likens to the one in Natasha Denona's own brush line, which I actually have. I think it's the number 10, but that brush is rough. Not ideal for a smooth experience, a comfortable one. For eyeshadow application, that's why I insist on getting the dyed goat hair, but which I know is more expensive. But if you want to pick up these cream to powder formulas in a way that you're actually going to see something on your lid, then this is a type of brush design worth considering. Hopping into another one here, this is like the more teal, and in the same manner, nudging back and forth, we got nice pickup there. I'll place it on the outer part of my lid. Slight tangent, Natasha designed these textures to be layerable and building, right? So it's on purpose that you need a little more pickup aggression on the first dip if you're not afraid to blend and you have the experience, where someone else, it looks light on purpose or is very light on the application, so they have the time and the room to blend and not feel like they screwed up because it's a super intense color. And there you have it. This is a great segue into, I don't know, any of the workers here in Sonia's line. Again, these are from the Fundamental line, distinguishable by the larger brush handle. This is more tapered from the Sky Eye set, but close up you see that the Jumbo Blender is a little more round, whereas the Worker 1 and 2, well, I would argue Worker 2 has a little bit of a taper. Did Sonia redesign Worker 2? I cannot remember. I apologize for not having that info offhand. If I do encounter it at some point, I'll make sure to post it somewhere in the description box down below or in a pinned comment. But compared to Worker 1, you see this is more rectangular, and because of that, it has a longer bristle length on the side, which makes it great for blending. So this has a little more of a smoother slide than Jumbo Blender. Jumbo Blender, you can still blend through the crease, but if you're using powders, then I would just use Worker 1. Fantastic, again, for picking up that shade and placing it on the lid. Why not, since we're still here? Let's go in with one of these, I don't know, golden copper shades. You could go in like this or like this. The wiggle wiggle, it will probably ensure the best pickup. I'm gonna slide it across the lid. My goodness. This brush is fantastic. I just enjoy the density, and you can successfully tap the shade on, but then use the edge of the brush to whisk it through the crease just to finish the application. It is fantastic. And the bigger base just makes it easy to hold on to on the edge, whereas a tapered brush, you need a little bit of a better grip so it doesn't fall off. But this is great if you still want to loosely hold the brush and it feels steady in the hands and precise with the contact it makes with your lids. Sonia G brushes, and I mentioned Sonia G earlier in just her caliber presenting Fude anything. The designs of her brushes represent what she felt was missing from brush designs that she has collected over the years, which just makes it insane to have that just archival, is that it? Hold on. That has an archival approach to knowing what she can create differently. That's crazy. And the sun is leaving, excuse me. This is what happens when you film with natural light. Throughout the video, there'll be just slight adjustments in my undertone. Like right now, look a little cool. It's fine. And lastly, Suqqu. This is from their original natural hairbrush line. I believe they replaced everything with synthetic material, which apparently is supposed to be like amazing. I didn't get them yet. That is a rather large purchase that I am waiting on if I do want to make it. I believe based on the gray root that this is Blue Squirrel, and perhaps one of the bigger, fluffier brushes that I have compared to the Canadian Squirrel and also the Kazan 06. You can see the Kazan is a little more round. It's not as long as the Suqqu brush. What I love from this brush is what I wish, well, hold on. Not that I wish that the Z Series 5 would blend. I respect this brush's role, but it's nice to have a shader that's a little longer, that's not as precise as the Z5, still with Blue Squirrel, and just has like that flexibility and that flow. Look at that. It has great splay too. So for instance, you wanted to go in just with a softer offering of shadow. If I were to pick up one of the powder mattes here, keep in mind Blue Squirrel compared to Goat will have a more sheer application, a more natural finish. One who wears eye makeup doesn't want it to be so standout, just impressionable. I think we'll expect great things from Gray Squirrel, but you see I already have a lot going on. The shadow has already traveled quite high, so the softer feel from Blue Squirrel will allow just the right amount of dose without overwhelming the skin. If I were to go in with a Goat hairbrush, the yellow gradient would have been too abrupt. Maybe would have been a little muddy also in the application, but this softer bristle just again presents that gradient well. It lightly gives that dose of color, again more sheer and more water-like in fashion. Without a doubt, one and done. Just be careful in choosing the eyeshadow you choose to apply this with. Again, Suqqu, I mean this is from the Suqqu brand, so beyond ideal. This type of a brush with this texture, this formula, please. I don't think as I deal with the melt, this is a little too soft for a melt matte. Maybe you could get away with the lighter matte. Perhaps those are softer pigments, but like the hardier ones, I wouldn't use this brush with the hardier ones. S, we have Surratt and Smith. I know, who am I including Smith brushes? Anyway, the Smith brushes I still wanted to present because although they're not my favorite as they are rough, these two brushes, the Arrowhead ones, 253 and 256, I enjoy the shape. The design I think is unique, it's clever. Again, these are with pony hair. They're rough. They're a little rough, but if you want that great lay down, if you want a little more resilience in your brush, you don't mind a little bit of roughness, this is great to especially get with the smaller brush to get that nudged right in the inner corner of the eye. These brushes have a role. Listen, not everyone can afford Fude, and maybe you like the pony hair, you like how it stands up well against several washings, you like the pickup, whatever your reasons are. I still wanted to include Smith because, again, I do really like the design of the Arrowhead shader brush, more literal in the architecture than, let's say, like a fluffier shader that I showed. For instance, when we get into the Surratt brushes, I have 3 here, 2 with sable hair. Don't know if it's Kolinsky or Weasel, just assuming from the looks of it, they might be Kolinsky, and because of that, you can use these brushes with creams and liquids. I think this brush was designed for their concealer palette, so those are cream products that you can use for under the eyes. Now again, there was a time, and I think still is, where people weren't overloading their under eyes with concealer, where you just needed a small brush like this, pat down the right amount of makeup to be more strategic with that application than using like a huge beauty sponge, whatever. And then you have the smaller brush, again, just judging from its size, liking it to be with the Kolinsky brush from Hokoudo. This is a little smaller. This goes out a little wider on the edges. And here we are, the Canadian Squirrel, the large eyeshadow brush, a little longer than Eihodo's WP S-1. You see here, maybe are they the same? Hold on, let's take a look. Maybe they are the same. They look similar. I think there's more of a taper in the Surratt brush, don't you think? For the same application recommendations, the Surratt brush, fantastic for softer mattes, metallics, satin textures that glide well across lid and crease. And you can see here the whip around and the windshield wiper application, fantastic. I do think this has a little bit more of a point than the Eihodo brush. And because of that, I think more precise for lower lash line application. If you didn't want to switch to a smaller brush, then you could use the same brush, lid, crease to lower lash line blend, and the color will stay tight and won't travel down so far. I use this brush a ton. I absolutely loved it. Even if I use a smaller brush, let's say I use the smaller sable brush for lid application, then I would go in with the Canadian Squirrel brush to blend through the crease, even though it's not like a tapered blender, like let's say the Chikuhodo G-S2 brush. It's so soft and has great movement that I feel more than appropriate to get your blend on through the crease. And maybe better if you have small hooded eyes and you need a brush that's flat on both sides to just get right in there and go bam, 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 bam. Then you're done. Yeah, done. Well, I forgot a letter. Rephr I have 2. Now I wanted to show 01 and 02. 01 is more of my fluffy shader design, and 02 is your literal shader. Pick up, lay down, and go. Again, I adore this specific design because lay down and blend and you're done. Both with Psycho goat hair like the Koyudo Kakishibuzome brushes. Versatile with powder or creams because this is actually undyed. So you can use this with cream if you want. Specifically for placing outer lid color, I could pick up Prestige. And for the same reasons I mentioned when I applied the Midnight Sun matte from Pat's palette, I just love tapping it on first and then using the edges to softly blend out and through the crease. I just think it's the easiest way to achieve that lovely flawless gradient, again, where this part looks even and not spotty, which I think is hard to avoid with the tapered brush. Maybe it's me and I suck, and that's also a possibility. Quickly showing you Rephr's 28 compared to the 01. 01 more square, 28 a little more tapered. Again, these are more of the lid moments, showstopper. For instance, if I wanted to, let me take Effervescent from Cleona Emily Violet Marie. With the 01, this is just going to lay down a little bit. There we go. Just enough. Precise here, It's not going to fluff the edges. It's not going to blend like the number one. Again, number one is not only responsible for tapping on color, but also blending it through once you've got it on there. It could be a little big for the outer fourth of your lower lash line. You might have to change to a smaller brush just to make sure it doesn't travel too far low. Let me give my little Smith brush some love. I'll give it some love. Let's pick up Dragantini, okay? And I'm gonna place Dragantini right here. So the arrowhead, great for this specific part of the eye. Look at that, it's like, whew. And because I'm not blending, I'm just tapping on. Be careful you don't stab in, because if you do, you'll feel those edges, okay? But that's another reason why I like to use the Smith brush. I haven't used it often. It's hard when you got a brush like this, okay? This is the Hokoudo brush. Let me dip into, let's do actually Katasie here. Why not? This is just so much softer. It's like night and day. Even the edges of the brush are silkier. Anyway, so here we go. Another example, okay, of where the smaller, more direct shader can come into play when it comes to your eyeshadow routine. And if you don't want to use a finger in applying the sparkly arcly like finale shade, then you could use something, again, that's more precise versus a fluffier, more dense brush for not only the lay down, but for the blending. A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. Unit. The unit brushes, these are both synthetic. This kind of reminds me of the Moe brush from Hokoudo, except the Unit 117 is shorter than the Moe brush. So here you go, side by side, one in front of the other. There's a little more length from the Moe brush. Similar thickness, and if you're wondering, synthetic brushes, I think, appropriate to use with more intense pigments that are going to stain your bristles. If you wanted to use Linda's The Color Palette or even Viseart's Colorful Palette, I think this is where the synthetic brushes come into play. Also, if you're using a lot of cream products, another reason why you would use this over a natural hair brush. The brush is wide enough and has enough bristle that you can pull it through the crease. It might not have the same amount of movement and flow than a brush that has a longer bristle, but you can still make it happen. And here we have the Unit 308 from the Orange series. This is slightly arrowhead. Well, it comes with a little bit of a point. Not as literal as the Smith brush. The Smith brush has a sharper edges coming up to that more pronounced point, but worth mentioning. As you could probably tell, fantastic for the lid. Carving out here under the brow if you like to take that step. Not great for blending. It's a little more stiff. It doesn't have as much movement as previously shown brushes, but as I've said, we still have those shaders that are the showstopper rolls, just tapping that shade on the lid, and then you have something a little bigger that you can use for general lid lay down. If you wanted to tap, maybe you'll pull it through the crease, but I would reach for another brush to blend the shadow through my crease. And lastly, we got Wayne Goss. I think Wayne Goss does have one shader in his collection. He's not crazy about shaders. I remember him saying this. Did he say this? Or am I just making that up? He loves a tapered brush. He loves his classic tapered brush because he loves that smooth blend. I get it. And you could use one side of this type of brush to bring color on the lid, albeit not intensely, because that's just not where you're going to get, especially with a blue squirrel brush. In you applying some type of metallic shade on your lid with that, no. However, he does have the 06, which although soft, still blue squirrel, it's flatter, I think will be more successful in you applying the metallic or shimmer shade here and then turning the brush on its side to still take the blend successfully through your crease. So not all is lost. You don't have to reach for the number 4. But then you have the synthetic brush from his series 26S. Great, because this has a lot more flexibility. So if you wanted to pull this through the crease after applying your cream shade on the lid, you can. You can still use this with powders, although I would insist using a natural brush with powders because I have them. I'm fine with that. If you are a user of only synthetic brushes, then one with a longer bristle I think will be a more appropriate choice to use for blending, right? Especially if you are a one and done wearer, you get the color on your lid and then use the brush to gently pull the shade through your crease, and fantastic for the lower lash line. So this brush in particular, I think a fantastic size for all rolls, lid, crease, and lower lash line. You can even, if you wanted to, just right on the tip of the brush, let's say if I wanted to pick up I'll pick up like a general champagne-y shade from Metropolis. You could just lightly tap here on the inner corner. You just have to be careful, okay? I think if you're watching this video, you probably have a ton of brushes, and you most likely will have one that could serve the inner corner tear duct role of pulling a little highlighter there. And that was the last one. Whew, we made it. Wow, I didn't think I was gonna make it. A lot of brushes. I hope this video helped in just providing a resource for the different types of shaders that we encounter, that we've seen. Again, there's such a wide range in this category, and that's what I enjoy it for, where you can still have a shader brush that's a little thicker, a little shorter. It could blend more or lay down more, but it's still a shader. You know what I'm saying? And as I have said before, I think just the more than ideal brush design for not, yes, I say beginner over and over again, but even the professional, if they're doing makeup on themselves and they know what to do, to have that one brush that will lay down your lid color, throw it through the crease, lower lash line, and you're done. It's just a satisfying process. And when using a tool that flawlessly executes everything beginning to end, and to have that security that no matter what, your eye look is going to be just together, irreplaceable. Let me know what your favorite type of shader brush is, whatever type, fam. I will see you down in the comments, and until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another, I don't know, eyeshadow tutorial, brush extravaganza, maybe cheek brushes next time, ooh, or a monthly faves. Take care, and I will see you again soon.